With us now is Democratic Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado, who is back in his home state after a busy couple of days here in Washington. He is a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Senator, welcome. What are the chances, as you see them, of an immediate escalation between Israel and Iran? It seems that the temperature has cooled. What's your read on the situation?
I think that's right. I mean, the weekend was not a good weekend for Iran. They launched over 300 ballistic missiles and other things at Israel, and working with her allies, Israel was basically able to bring down every single one. And so I think that we've been able to together reposition things for the moment there, but we need to be vigilant. We need to make sure that deterrence really has been reestablished, but for the moment, it appears that it has.
Okay, so the Wall Street Journal reporting that the Biden administration is pursuing a deal that would have Israel commit to Palestinian statehood in exchange for diplomatic recognition by Saudi Arabia. Do you think that's the kind of deal that we're talking about, some sort of a grander bargain?
I think that would be very important, and that's what we should be working toward. I think that's what the American people support. They want to have two states living in peace side by side. And let me just say, for people who think that's naive, I think that what's been demonstrated over the last 10 or 15 years is how naive the current policies have been, how naive Bibi Netanyahu has been. And the city that Hamas built underneath the ground in Gaza is a demonstration that the current policies have not worked. And I think the American people and I would say most Israelis don't want to see another decade or two like the last decade that we've had. Being able to work toward a two-state solution, even if Netanyahu is against it or is saying somehow that's naive, I think that is where the world is now on this issue. And if we can do it working with the Saudis, all the better for regional stability, for economic development, and for us to be able to have a hope that children's future in the region is going to be better and more peaceful.
Okay, so the implications for 2024 are real. Here in the U.S., a new poll of swing states found about a third of Democrats in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin all saying that President Biden is too supportive of the Israelis in a race that we know is going to come down to the wire. So how does the president turn that around? How does your party turn that around and get those folks back in the fold?
I think the president has no choice but just to do what he thinks is right every day between now and the election on this issue. There's an old saying in the Middle East that there are no prophets in our time. I think that's true, and I think it's very hard to predict the future. We need to make sure that as we go, that we're standing up for human rights, that we understand that we have a moral obligation to the innocent Palestinians in Gaza, but something that didn't come up with your reporter, we need to remember that there are Israeli and American hostages being held today in the Gaza Strip by Hamas. So Joe Biden's in a very difficult, unenviable position. He should just try to do the right thing between now and the election, and I think the election will take care of itself.
One of the things that I've heard military experts say and others talk about is this would be the wrong time to have a stalemate, right? That after all of the carnage and loss that has been experienced in this war, that without actually finishing the job in Rafah or actually finishing the job with Hamas, that we would be left with something even worse than when we began, and stopping Israel here would be very problematic. Is that a fair assessment? Are they close to being done? How do you see it?
I wouldn't say it's close. I think they've got a long way to go, and I think being done is probably not a realistic way of thinking about this. They are going to have to manage this terrorist threat for the foreseeable future. I do think that they have an obligation to continue to try to root out the people that attacked them and that killed 1,200 Israelis. and they're going to continue to do that. But I think it's become very clear that the world wants to make sure that as few civilians are in the crossfire as possible, and that Israel can be part of an effort to stand up humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip. And we're going to have to help with that as well. So this is a very difficult situation. It's not something that can be managed well from one headline to the next headline. But we can see what the stakes really are with Iran's attack this weekend. I think it's really important the way we came together with our allies in the region, not just Israel, but Jordan and Saudi Arabia as well. And then this week, to see the House of Representatives finally pass not just Israel aid with over 300 votes, but aid to Ukraine with more than 300 votes. You know, I feel like maybe we're at a moment where we're putting the division behind us and we're reasserting again the role of American democracy in the world, and that can't come soon enough. These divisions have been killing us, and they've been counterproductive to our role in the world. I hope we are going to start putting that behind us and begin to stand up again for the position that no other country in the world can take but ours.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider, and don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.